This will be here again. And maybe just the, to answer something you said, it's true, my scholarship started in German, but since about 5 years I only publish in English. So I have learned from being in India that it makes more sense to publish in India, and it might be something which could be interesting since I'm talking to students of history. Yeah, since 2 years in Göttingen we have changed the MA program completely to English. So the language of instruction is English now. So that could be of some interest here too. To make it easier for people to join the camp, read that also from the sources he has taken. Why do we have all this new material? I mean, it's not new, it's just a compilation. But in the course of time, I think it's something which is important in Germany, but also in historiography in general, to look not only at what the source says, but also on the way the source is written, to have what we call a narratological approach, looking at the way historiography is done. And I will always mention one book, it's now not entirely new anymore, it's 20 years old, it has been written unfortunately in German and there is no English translation. But I still consider it a very important source to learn something about historiography in India, especially during the Mughal time, but also for the Delhi Sultanate period. But what is more relevant for what I'm talking about today is to look, I think it's a new trend to consider compiled sources to have a value on their own. Because earlier, as I mentioned, people said, oh, it's a compiled sources. Let's only look at the original text and let's forget about the compilation. We don't need it. But of course, the people wrote these texts. They compiled books, and for them, therefore, it made some sense. There was some sense in taking the old source and putting them together in a new shape. And I just mentioned that they have been, let's say, approaches to study the way of composition, to look at not only what they have taken, but also what they have left out from their original sources, and to understand the meaning of to say there is a purpose in arranging the material, and there is a sense in what we did, and to try to understand the sense. And this, let's say, approach I have been applying to the Masiri Rahimi. So, let's first turn a little bit to the Masiri Rahimi. It's a source which has been dedicated to Abdurrahim Khan. I will say a little about it later. It's a huge book of about 3,000 pages in the printed edition. And I will say a little bit more about the different parts of it. And the book has been written by Abdul Baqi Nihavandi, an Iranian author. But before I start, maybe some words on Abdurrahim Khan. Maybe you all know him already, then it's just superfluous, but if you don't know him, you can just learn that he was born in 1556 and died in 1627. He was the son of Bayram Khan. Aligarh Khan was a very eminent military and political figure in the time of Humayun, and Aligarh Khan also lived in the early years of Akbar, where he was, let's say, the educator of Akbar, his advisor, and during the first years after the death of Humayun, Aligarh Khan more or less conducted the political affairs for Akbar. But Akbar, when he grew up, decided at a certain moment that it's now enough of the tutelage, that he wants to do politics himself, and Bayram Khan was dismissed, and he was murdered, probably not by people from Akbar, by some bandits. And at that moment, and this is very important, let's say, one important step in the career of Abdul Rahim is that he was brought to the court of Akbar and was educated like one of the princes. That is at least what the Mazir Rahim says, and here interest starts already. Because there's an emphasis on saying that he was really like a prince. And I like very much the miniature painting which you can see here, because no, young stages of his life, Abdurrahim Khan was one of the most important Mansab stars in the time of Akbar, especially, but also Jahangir. As you probably all know, there were always some Mansab stars at the same level, but Abdurrahim was one of the most important, and he also had one of the most important titles, Khan, so the Khan of the Khans. But also with the titles, it's not really clear who has the most important title. But he was really a very important figure. He was responsible for the conquest of Gujarat, of Sindh, and he was also very much involved in conquest into Dhaka, where he had his own residence in Burhanpur. He was later, and this was a serious, let's say, cut in his career. He was involved in the rebellion of the later Shah Jahan, and this ended up in the extinction of most of his family. So really, he lost almost all family members and survived as an old and more or less broken man. Um, but what he's really famous for is to have been the patron of artists, poets, intellectuals. So his patronage network is really interesting work of studying. And he is also renowned for having composed poetry. He said known many different languages, Persian, Chagatai, but also Hindi, and he's said to have composed poetry in Hindi. So far for Abdurrahim. Now, what about the author of our songs? He was from Iran. Originally, he came from Jura in the region of Hamadan. He was born in 1918, and at the beginning had some official posts for the Safavid rulers. We are here in the period of the founder of the Safavid dynasty, Ismail. But then there was some problem. We do not know exactly the nature of his problem, but his brother lost his life, and Abdul Baqi obviously decided that it's not safe anymore to stay longer in Iran, so he first went to Mecca, and from Mecca he came to India to the court of Abdurrahim Khan. In this was, it's not a single case, several people came via Mecca to India. Also to compile a book on Abdurrahim. Probably, I rather think he was invited to write such a book, and so he wrote Mazir Rahimi, which were completed only 2 years after his arrival. So for 3,000 pages, this is really a tremendous work. And we do not know much about his further fate. He died after 1046, 1636, because we have some note in his handwriting dating from that year, and afterwards we don't know anything. So, let's now have a closer look at this book. What are the goals of this book? So, some of the goals we learn from the introduction, where Abdul Baqi himself declares the goals of the book. So, what he wants to do is to describe the perfection of Abdurrahim and his illustrious deeds, and he wants to immortalize the name of Abdurrahim, and I think he managed very well to do it. I have the impression that there is undeclared goals, and the undeclared goal, in my opinion, that's my hypothesis, is that he wanted to put Abdurrahim on the same level as the ruling king Jahangir. So a kind of equalization with the pacha. And I think this is what becomes more or less obvious in the Marsilia Latin, for which I will argue and can, of course, contradictory and most often very criticism. And I think this is obvious from the structure of the text and also from the vocabulary he uses, from the ideas he uses, specific terms used in the text. And if we are looking at the structure of the text, this means we have to look at the compilation. And they are related to the founders of the Karakoyunlu dynasty. So what becomes very evident is here that we learn that Abdurrahim also had some, let's say, clearly dynastic background. Chapter 1 deals with Bayram Khan, that's to say, the regions which were conquered by Abdurrahim, Gujarat into the Deccan. Chapter 3 deals with the benefactions by Abdurrahim, so it's about architectural improvements especially. It's a very interesting chapter which unfortunately is very short. We would like to learn more about it, and it talks especially about the period in which he was in the south. And chapter 4 deals with the fate of his sons. And if you look at that structure, I cannot help feeling that we have a dynastic history. It is compiled or written in a way a dynastic history is written, starting with the ancestors, the father, the ruler, or not ruler, and then the sons. Which is first point I think interesting. Then, just to say one more word about the structure is about half of the book, about 1,600 pages, is the so-called Khateme or epilogue, in which Abdul-Baqi describes scholars and eminent persons which have come to the court of Abdurrahim and which have been promoted by him, either by being directly patronized or by receiving one-time salary or gifts, etc. And also military leaders in Hansaplas. And Abdul-Baqi was obviously proud of this structure of his book, and obviously this part was a very important part of it because it covers half of the book. So what he writes in one part is, in spite of the presence of many poets who were in the retinue of Jalaluddin Akbar and who received many remunerations by him, and the same is true for other rulers, the other learned people did not have the idea to assemble reports on their conquests on conditions with the poetry which has been dedicated to the price of these laws. And this is true. I think it is indeed a unique source which makes it so interesting for the study of patronage, because you have to have the combination of the life or biography and the people who have been working for him and who came to his court. And in this, it is really a unique piece of historiography and literature into one process. So what we can see, especially disappointed me so much when reading the book for the first time for my MA thesis, because many parts of this book are just abbreviated chapters of the Tabaqatul Akbar. But there are some modifications. First, I looked at the modifications, and that makes it interesting. One thing is the change of order. So we don't have the same order, and I will say a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. Then we have, of course, the addition of some parts on Abdurrahim, on his ancestors and father, and some parts from the Tabaqat have been combined with the text written by Abdul-Baqi himself, and this is especially the case in the parts related to the conquests done by our right side, and you have the list of the different dynasties which are covered both in the Tabaqat and in the Marsil And you can see it's more or less the same names, but the order has been changed. And some parts have been added. This might look a little bit confusing. I just give some information. I marked here in red what has been added by the Marsil. And I marked here where the different parts were shifted. So, removal without help of Aligarh, Khan or Abdurrahim, they have not been changed. Everything has been more or less left as it was. But in the reports or the parts on the dynasties which were conquered with the help of Aligarh Khan or Abdurrahim, the role of Aligarh Khan and Abdurrahim is emphasized, especially of Abdurrahim. And we have long additions to the Tabaqat in the chapters on Gujarat, Sindh, and Deccan. And the general impression which results out of these modifications is that the victory and the conquests in these cases was due to their participation. It was, in the end, Abdurrahim was the conqueror and not Akbar. And I have the impression that there is also a shift in the intention. History does not culminate anymore in the Mughal victory, but history somehow culminates in the victory by Abdurrahim and his father. So we have a shift in the emphasis of the participants. And for the second conquest of India by Humayun, so when he came back and conquered India after his stay with the Safavids, according to the restriction in the Masir Rahimi, it was due to Bayram Khan. So he was the guy who was in the end responsible. And I just quote one sentence that says, Humayun became victorious because of the strength of this Khan. I think this is very explicit. So it was the Khan, which in this case was Bayram Khan. So you have to be careful. Both the father and the son had the same title. And so it was Bayram Khan who was responsible for conquering. Without him, Humayun, forget about it. So forget about this conquest of India. That's the way. That's one way of changing source material. I give you another. That's Humayun made him, that's Bayram, strong and gave him plenty of gold. And he, Bayram, went in for making the name of his master known everywhere as a conqueror and empire builder. And the reasons for the shift of this king, the late Khan will become obvious in the conquest of the days between the rulers. So again, we have this emphasis of the role of Bayram. Now, I wanted to look at one specific part. This is the same overview you already had, but I marked now in yellow parts which have not been taken over from the Tabaqat. So, maybe I cannot go back. So, what you can see is that the part on Babur, Humayun, and the beginning of the period of Akbar is not taken from the Tabaqat, but from the Akbar. From the 8th year on is the Tabaqat. And after the 8th year, nothing was released. He could have, there was material in the period of the compilation of the Masir. He could have used more about it, but he didn't use it. He just says, since Nizamuddin Ahmad didn't cover the last 40 years, and since I did not find any other source on that, and since the writing down of the event of this ruler was not appropriate for me, I really gave the reader the other texts written on the eminent class. So he totally skips this, the last part of Akbar, and just gives a very short summary. But what is even more interesting, and I would say scandalous, is that the rule of Jahangir is covered by 5 pages from him. So instead of describing the rule of Jahangir, he describes the deeds, the rule of Bayram Khan and Abdurrahman. So let's say Jahangir is more or less replaced by these two persons. So you can see this. Yeah. So, and I think this is already quite interesting that he's really replaced. But it's even more interesting if you look at the words he uses to describe Abdurrahim. So the panegyrics. Of course, his panegyrics we have to be a little bit careful because we find them misleading. But I think here it really goes to limits which are surprising. Um, so we find, for example, one sentence in which the book says, the situation and rank of him, that is now Abdurrahim, is not less than that of a Pachok, because Akbar has called him Tarzan son. In the place of Jahangir, I would not like this sentence, to be honest. This sentence written for my family, I don't know much. Because we really explain the position of the son and of the prince to a long-term associated with so he is a very nice. I know that in the we have everything. And I told you that in one well, but show is just so all as he told the and I was really shocked when I saw the expression of some comment on inside the comment was Akbar before, but now we have a clear use for Abdurrahim. And whoever comes to the thought of Abdurrahim offenses with regard to Surah Imana, Abdurrahim is called Ozor Suri Bananavi, and he is dedicated to the idea of Surah. This can, of course, be used not only for reading, but still we have here key terms of neural ideology, Akbarian ideology, also Jahangirian ideology, which are all attributed to Abdurrahim Khan. So, and what I like to find surprising is that he the attribute the conqueror so often in combination with Abdurrahim's name. So, he's called Abdurrahim Rahman. Of course, this is can use for military leader, but using it in the period of Jahangir so frequently is a little bit, I don't know how we should call it, but somehow I understand that Abdurrahim is the real Jahangir. And instead of this Jahangir is just nothing. So, in the conclusion, I would say that Abdurrahim in this compiled text borrowed by the attributes and by the text just he is described like a Jah. His Jah normally used for Akbar and Jahangir. He is categorized to a certain extent this Jahangir by calling him Jahangir, but also calling him Tarzan of Akbar. And of course, by replacing the regular use of Jahangir by the description of Abdurrahim and his great deeds. So, we could understand this in a way that Abdurrahim is really the conqueror and the real Jahangir. Here's one more question, and I would like for you to look at that in the future because it has honestly, I don't have an answer for it. In the book, Hindustan is called Kufr Abad, which is a nice term that describes, and Akuraki is also prized as a fighter against Kufr. And it's not that Kufr disappeared in this time. On the other hand, also, if you look at this Parliament describing all the people working for him, not a single Hindi word is mentioned at this point. But I'm pretty sure they have, because after all, he himself was compiling it. So there's a total discrepancy between what we know about some of the deeds of Atoraki and his own practical engagement and the way Aphrodite describes it. So we may wonder, is there a kind of anti-Hindu subtext introduced by Aphrodite? Maybe Aphrodite didn't realize? Or is there some concept of Aphrodite's personality which has not been understood? So this is something I would like to study in the future, because I think there's still much to say about Aphrodite in the future. Thank you.
You will not find Nishapuri. So it is useful if you want to make collection from the lost poetry of the contemporary poets, you will find there. One thing. And secondly, this use of the term kufr is like this. After all, he was coming from Iran, which is not only an Islamic land, but it was growing very, not very tolerant towards others also. So people use this term kufr when they want to denounce anyone. So he's denouncing a place which he's going to adopt, because when I read the indigenous sources written in the same contemporary period, I find the word for India is Jannat Nishan. Hindustan Jannat Nishan. So kufr could be attributed to his recent arrival from Iran. His perception of India will be clouded by experience of his homeland. And obviously, short period did not make you feel attached the way you feel attached when you stay at some place. But he was looking for patronage. So Abdul Rahim Khan's career you have built here very well about kufr. Do you agree with me, Eva? That maybe because of his recent arrival from Iran.
Yeah, I perfectly understand that. My view
Abdul Bahi, yes.
Aphrodite is not the
Okay, so that you are right. Should have cancelled it, but I am feeling that Abdul Rahim was so preoccupied with his own writings all the time. He was not reading everything. This is my feeling. That might be the case. So kufr you will not find in the other sources. There is Hindustan, Jannat Nishan. And coming to Abdul Rahim, extolling him almost like Akbar and Jahangir, I feel quite justified. He was more learned than Akbar and Jahangir. Remember his learning. So a learned person should be given more respect than a ruler. Because the way he was respected by Akbar, you would have read Jahangir Nama better than me. Because Jahangir was very jealous of Abdul Rahim Khan. He was jealous of everyone who had any pretension to learning. And this is a common trait among learned people. They hate other learned persons. They want to keep. I'm telling you, I'm like that. Maybe I'm not learned, but I do not think there should be. So Eva is just a yes. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But India is it's a heaven now. It's you who is undergoing through problem. I have been to US just now. I returned from US 2 months back. They are still in this going problems. So what was the point I was making? So Jahangir was so jealous of Abdul Rahim Khan that he punished him for political reasons, that you are not loyal, you have some sort of alliance with the Deccan rulers, which Abdul Rahim Khan had. Because maybe the old man thought enough fights, now let me sit down and should do my scholarly works and the architectural projects which were going on in Burhanpur. It's one essential medieval city. So Jahangir called him in the court, and Jahangir writes that when I invited Abdul Rahim Khan Khana to the court, and I wanted to say that you are a dual person concerning my dynastic loyalty, Jahangir writes that he is such a respectable old man that I feel ashamed when I told him in the court and wanted to punish him. And then he adds to it that I saw my father Akbar in dream. You would have read it obviously. I saw my father in dream, Akbar, saying, Sheikh Baba, there is a river of milk between me and Abdul Rahim Khan Khana. So Abdul Rahim Khan Khana, very venerable figure, and this kind of appreciation, for the patron was so obvious in the Qasida tradition of the Iran and also of India, because Indo-Iran is going so closely. So this was about you, maybe you like it or not, but now I'll tell you my own experience. So from the brittled book, I have taken out some pages and I feel very bad. I stopped using that text when I came to know that it has been recently published from Iran. Perhaps you have an edition. It has been published from Iran, and I missed to bring it a copy from Harvard, and now I was regretting when sitting here that I am not having a ready copy. I would have given to my library also. So, but I have taken out the biographical part. He has written wonderful biography of Mullah Shukrullah Shirazi, because Mullah Shukrullah Shirazi has similar story coming from Iran via the same route, joining the services of Abdul Rahim Khan Khan, and from there he was taken by Prince Khurram, because Khurram thought he is a person who should be with me, and finally Khurram trusted him and he becomes the emperor. He will become the prime minister, the Diwanul of Emperor Shah Jahan. So, and usually people think that this man, Mullah Shukrullah Shirazi, was not a learned person, but recent researches of Rajiv Imra shows what a learned man this Mullah Shukrullah Shirazi was, who is lying buried here in Agra. The Chini ka Roza is there. So this kind of biography I could not come across about Mullah Shukrullah Shirazi. And next I will stop by saying only one thing. Then I read a very important biography of a man whom we know as Makramat Khan. Perhaps a student should know who was Makramat Khan. Pata? Yes, one of the supervisors of Taj Mahal and also Shah Jahan was. So Makramat Khan's original name is Mullah Murshid Shirazi, and he comes from Hamza, Mullah Murshid. Mullah Murshid Shirazi came via Sindh to the same place, to the place of Abdul Rahim Khan Khana for patronage. And again, a man like Prince Khurram goes there and recognizes the talent in the person of Makramat Khan, because he is supervisor of Taj Mahal as well as of Shah Jahanabad, and he served him loyally throughout his life until he died in Shah Jahanabad in 1649 after the completion of Shah Jahanabad. Abdul Baqi Nihavandi and Makramat Khan happened to be class fellow and friend right from Hamdan. And he gives such a biography of him, that how we played together in the village. But we have got to come out to receive higher education in Shiraz, and from there how we parted our ways. He went to serve rulers of Sindh, and from Sindh he came here to Burhanpur, and I was very happy that finally I met my childhood friend. But it so happened, bad luck of mine, that Murshid Quli Khan Shirazi was found such an attractive noble to Prince Khurram that he has taken him away Khurram, and he has left with Khurram to North India, Agra, and I am longing to see my friend. So this kind of emotional factor is there, but now students should come up. But I am fascinated with what have